It's just that because of the way it logged in strange, and I wasn't trusting that I could find out where I actually was.
Fair. Totally fair.
All right. So, okay, we are going to go over, everybody's going to share what they learned, changed, from their sharing time that they had first. And then we're going to go through our pre and our post, I'm sorry, pre-exam, um, uh, and qualitative in a pretty short amount of time. And then next Thursday is going to be your presentations, which I'm really looking forward to. And what I will say about that, as you get ready to turn in your paper and do your presentation, I encourage you that since I said you could use previous work, and a lot of you did, not everybody. And so if you're using previous work, I encourage you to go back now that we're at the end of, revisiting concepts that you already knew, but now you've heard it and thought about it in a new way. And make sure there's nothing you wouldn't change from last time, right? So this is something you did previously, and then hopefully you've thought about some things in different ways, maybe even learned something new. So what would you change from that previous work? So this gives you a chance to go back in there, and if you're using previous work, go ahead and, correct anything that needs to be corrected or just improve things where you can. And take that time for that growth. Okay. So any other questions about, I think I still need to do uploads for last week. Whoops, I'm sorry. I'll get that done. Um,
I have a question. Does it have to be like a complete study? And the reason why I'm asking is that the part of analysis, does it have to like
good,
include that?
good question. Okay, yeah. So it is a complete study. I mean, I want to see needs to be everything. But I don't expect you to go, you know, that in depth into your analysis piece. You've seen about how much I've kind of talked about stats in this class. When I need to find the sheets and send them out to you because they're fantastic. Don't let me forget. I've got to do that at the end of class. Okay, so because that's so helpful. So yeah, I'm just not, you will have stats included, but you just don't have to go into very in depth for it. So I would say one paragraph should be enough, and it can be a relatively short paragraph depending on how straightforward your stats are. Okay. So, I'm not, you're not going to lose points if you have something wrong. I'll just probably give you feedback, even though it'll be after the semester is over, but I'll still be giving you feedback if if there's stuff you can improve, or definitely if you had anything wrong, I'll let you know, but you're not going to lose points for having it, you know, that's not what this class is about, right? It's about learning, not worried about the grades, because the grades
Um,
will be fine.
I have another question.
Yes.
So last week you asked us not to turn in anything.
Mhm.
So like, and I think there's a grade for last week. How do you want to like?
It won't count against you. You're fine.
Okay, all right.
It's if for
Okay.
what's gonna be easiest for me is just to give everybody full points for that, if that makes you feel better to see them there. So yeah, got a freebie. Actually, it's all a freebie, but
Thank
anyway.
you, Rebecca. You took the words out of my mouth.
Okay.
I was going to say, I don't mind to go first since I went
Okay.
last in the breakout room.
Sounds great.
Um, Something I think the biggest takeaway for me, because I felt like I was able to really run through it because it's very similar to what I've been talking about for weeks now. But Sam brought to my attention the article that I reviewed had used something called they use semi-structured interviews and photo voice to
Uh-huh.
explore the lived experience. And Sam introduced me to the term multimodal that I think
Uh-huh.
you all have talked about. And I thought that was really cool because as a person with ADHD who is very much a visual learner,
Mhm.
having a photo, like I'm just thinking about being in a motivational interviewing
Mhm.
kind of interview with a patient and talking to them about what their lived experience is, what's their social environment, how's their home cooking, like what equipment do they have. There are so many things that I have to find out without actually asking them, do you have a stove? Do you have this? That I think photos would be a, it's just so, I don't know, it opens up a whole world where you can then discuss what they bring and thinking about the different like things that people would bring to that, whether it was a photo of like their meal or their pantry at home. I love the idea of this multimodal,
Mhm.
like combining linguistic and photo. I wrote photoistic because I don't even know what I was saying, but
Well,
that combination, I mean, I think that's special for me personally.
yeah, and let's take that. I'm gonna take that even to the next level, being forward, future thinking about it,
Hmm.
in that either research or applied clinical experience. I could see using video or photos, but videos would be easier with AI. So if you have a client, let's go with practice first, right? So if we
Hmm.
have a client and we ask them to do a either photo of their fridge or give us a kitchen tour where they give us they give us a
Oh,
whole
love.
tour, yeah, their whole environment, maybe even of their grocery store. They could even do of their grocery store experience,
Hmm.
and kind of put you could give an assignment where people put the food
Yeah.
in the cart and talk about it and say why they choose what they choose, very casually as they go if they're comfortable with that. Anyway, the point is you could actually then use AI, bring AI into that, because AI could probably do, if it can't do it right this second, it will be able to do it very soon, an analysis of their fridge and of their pantry. And
Hmm.
you could even have generate a report to where you're looking at potentially macro and micro, micro.
Whew, you're speaking my language.
Yeah, so you can get that.
I I mentioned being at Fincy, and I saw one of the things that just blew my mind, changed my perspective, was literally that. It was a company that was working at the time, it's very introductory, but with hospitals. And it would literally, like, you put the tray under the food and it could scan the tray at the hospital and tell you, oh, nope, that patient is blah, 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 and they need this. And so they're doing that like random
Yeah, check.
spot
That's right.
checking by like an AI form. And I mean, I just think that's incredible. I've only used thematic analysis to take a transcript and use it, but doing that to like a
Yeah.
video, you would get
Yes.
so much.
So much. And the thing is,
Wow.
you as a practitioner and definitely you as a researcher most likely don't have time to necessarily analyze all of it. But
Oh.
it's similar to, wow, and I've never done this. Sorry, I'm going to take a second of you guys.
No,
I'm,
I
I'm
love
going to go down this
this.
rabbit hole for just a second because I have for a long time known what I wanted for I call it a doc in a box, that I really
Hmm.
want medical care to be that we go into a little room and we sit down and we interact with this avatar or whatever, and it does a very good assessment. It
Hmm.
really checks because AI, it can be, just it can be a really, really, really good assessment that we usually don't have time for necessarily when we see
Hmm.
a doctor. And then you can do blood pressure. You could actually even have uh, a toilet in there. You can do,
Stool
samples
samples. Oh,
exactly out on the go,
in
you can
private.
in private, but it's all right there, and it's all
Yeah.
and can be led. And then there's some that you could do some with just a finger stick. Um, I think that we're getting closer to more that we can tell, without actually having to have that puncture. But so a little bit of blood work could be done. Okay, so I want all of this to happen. And you think, oh, she's totally AI. She loves AI. This is it. I want this to actually free up doctors to be able to do the doctoring that that they, most of them came into the field because they love. So at the end of this, I think the patient should get and the doctor gets this report where it
Hmm.
says, so if you came in with certain symptoms, it's like, well, 96% chance it's this. right?
Mhm.
It's got, and then it breaks down all the percent, and maybe it stops at anything under 75. I don't know, whatever we said
Mhm.
or the doctor says, right? So, and maybe the doctor sees the report first, or maybe the patient never sees it. I don't know.
Or maybe it
But
like blocks like a certain, it's not going to give you like a jump scare report. It's going to say
right.
like
And that's
discuss
why
this with your
it
provider.
might go just to the
Yeah.
provider first, and the provider decides what to
Like
share.
you
Anyway,
come in and see it
so
together. Yeah.
right. And if maybe I've already said this in class because it's called human in the loop. Did I already talk about the doc in the box? I
Mm-mm.
don't think so. Anyway, but my son talks about
Definitely not.
okay. My son talks about an AI, they talk about human in the loop and how important that is. So I'm not trying to take the human out of the loop, right? I'm trying to give the doctor, first of all, okay, we'll do a bad joke that everybody knows it. We'll just does anybody know what they call the when as they finish medical school and the person who is at the lowest in their class and they're just barely pass everything, and does anybody know what they call them when they get done?
A
Adult
doctor.
crown.
A doctor. Sam already
Oh,
heard it. Yep.
yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we are people, and there are some doctors out there who are not going to be the best in the world, right?
Hmm.
This helps, account for some of that. This, so there are errors, there are things they miss. Their doctors get older, doctors, there's all sorts of stuff. So by putting this AI system with that, and then the doctor gets a report and talks to the patient, and then that doctor can actually put hands on the patient. I would love to get a little bit more holistic with
Ooh.
really being able to communicate, right? The human piece of it that AI cannot do.
Hmm.
Um, so I've said all that now. Now, what I am challenging you guys to do, because I just now realized I have not done this, is I have not thought about what our field needs to do. In fact, this should be a
Oh,
great
I
study.
gotcha.
Yeah, we need, so
Let's
what,
go into business.
yeah, so we need to think what kind of things. I mean, we just talked about this AI working with the RD, right?
Hmm.
Or the researcher, because you can apply this to research too. What else?
They
What
could
else does?
conduct the full NFPE, like you were talking blood work and
Mhm,
things. It
mhm,
would take, I mean, that is such a massive part of what
mhm.
you learn in that clinical
Yeah.
year of rotation. And it is very rudimentary. It
Yeah.
is 100% by the book.
Mhm.
And that could
That
free
could all
up
be,
the
yeah,
space for actual healthcare.
yeah, and
Um,
communication. Yeah. Yes.
yeah, I think that's so
That's
beautiful. That's
great.
kind of what I told Sam is bringing that like photo evidence into it feels
Mhm.
like taking, I remember, and she also remembered Dr. Kavanaugh's class. I did a community assessment and I was taking photos
Yeah.
of where the sidewalk ends and where these things are needed. And
Mhm.
it feels like my love of combining that
Yeah.
community and
Yeah.
clinical piece. I can't let go of either, you
Right.
know. I
Don't
don't
let go.
think they're
They're great
separate.
pieces.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they're the same thing. So I just that woo, you charged me up. I
That's
love this
cool.
idea.
Let's do it. So Sam, what do you think is what we're talking about here with AI and video and is that qualitative or is that quantitative? Where is that going to fall?
Good question. Uh,
Ooh.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like with the photo stuff, I mean, I feel like it would be I mean, I guess it depends on like
Mhm.
how you're gonna analyze
But
this.
I'm saying we if the AI does the analysis for us, right?
Mm, I see what you're saying. My God, when I was in my last qual class, I had every student had to like present on a chapter, and mine was AI and qual. Now I'm like trying
Oh,
to go
neat.
back and remember, but I think that like from what I was reading, that like using AI and qual was still if you're like for example, if you're putting in like interview data and asking it to like do a thematic analysis for you, I mean, you're still ending up with qual data, but it's like clearly you can't like rely on that alone,
Right.
you know, like there's
Human in the
some
loop. Yes.
So would it technically turn it? I mean, because we're using quantitative data if we're getting it from the AI, but we're doing qualitative research.
Or, I mean, I don't know if it counts as quantitative. I mean, at the
Well,
same
and
time, maybe it's an ultimate mixed methods. I don't know. I'll have to think on it for a while. I don't
this
have,
is the conversation we
yeah.
had in our breakout room,
Oh,
literally,
cool.
like
Excellent.
trying to figure out where those small nuances
Yeah,
were,
yeah.
because I do feel like like my personally was based in, we're talking about this qualitative,
Mhm.
but I could see where there were other methods like slipping in maybe. So I love that you just went to the same place.
That's so cool. That's fun. It really is neat. Okay. Okay. I'll keep going. Um, thank you, thank you. This is fun. At least for me. Some of you guys look really tired. All right, and not just Meg. Who wants to go next?
Um, I feel like I can go because we had a whole discussion about how mine kind of turned into more than just qualitative because
Mhm.
I wanted to do a focus group and then my thought was how can I try to use the focus group to shape a lived experience, but it kind of turned into so my idea was that I'd run a focus group and get the feedback on um other tracking apps athlete had used, dietary preferences, like nutritional needs out of an app, and get that sort of experience and feedback, and then use that to design an app and ask if they would use it for 12 weeks, and then do another focus group and get their experience on how it shaped their perception of their diet quality. And so I was talking to these guys, and they were like, initially, was thinking it would be interesting to do like a dietary assessment before and after, not as a assessment tool, but like as a context tool for the researchers. But that also kind of dipped into maybe away from just a qualitative.
It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Fine.
But it was a super interesting conversation. Like,
Mhm.
um, Sam was great. Ricky, like everyone was really good about giving me feedback and talking me through my design. Yeah, I feel like I went like the step away from purely qualitative because I mean, what can we do with the information we get from
Mhm.
like the analysis of their
Yeah.
wants and needs? And that's when I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to do this and then do a focus group after and get their experience. And that's
Mhm.
kind of, yeah, it was a
Yeah,
good conversation.
my qual friends call me a quant head, because I do like to count things and report and, so I'll take qual work and still kind of turn it into a little bit of quant at the end, as just because it's how my brain wants to look at it and think about it. So I get you there. It's okay. We can break the rules and make new rules, right? Um, and that's how we grow in research. Um, why do you think we do? Okay, so some people think surveys are a lot better, right? Or not surveys, but quantitative research is better. It has this reputation for some people, right? I think that's probably because they can control it and understand it a little bit easier, and they don't know that much about qual. Because why, if we're doing okay, let's say if we're doing research that has to do with what people think at all, and we're doing it in surveys, why would we choose to do surveys there? What's a reason to do the surveys?
Um,
Would
like
you be like, oh, go ahead,
open-ended
Meg.
surveys. Sorry, I'm wondering like when I think of surveys, I'm wondering what sort of form you were using. Are you using like at scale 1 to 5 things that can be like analyzed? Or are you going survey for like an open answer?
So now, to me, open answers on surveys is you own. Earlier, I was like, I don't have a class to talk about survey design. You do not want to use open-ended if you can help it, ever.
Hmm.
Open-ended is the paper version of just qual approach, right?
Right.
And has to be analyzed as such, really. And so it has all the limitations you would have with qual, only more because then you've got how much people feel like writing, and then you've also got, oh, there's just so many factors. Okay, so open-ended, not a good choice, except for you don't want to create your own surveys unless you absolutely have to, because it takes forever to do it well. And if you have something new that you're trying to find out about and it needs to be done on a survey, using it open-ended keeps you from having to do the same kind of validation process that you would have to do for a question. I know that's ironic, right? So sometimes you actually want to do open-ended so that you don't have to worry about not about using a not validated question in a survey. I don't know if you caught all the positives and negatives there. But back to why we do surveys as opposed to just talk to people.
For ease factor, it's a lot easier
It's
to
easier. You're
collect
getting totally getting you're down the road I'm talking about here. So it's easier. It's easier to do what?
collect and analyze
Collect. Talk to me about the benefit of
of ease of
quantitative,
collection.
excuse me, benefit.
You
Is it
can
because it already exists?
Yeah, if you're using a validated tool, which is great. But so Bryce, what do you think? I haven't heard your voice yet today.
So what I was thinking was, I think the term was called thematic analysis. So I guess getting like similar words down, would be easier.
So
Like,
yeah, but I'm asking, I'm thank you. And see, this is great for me to this is actually a face validation of sorts and cognitive interviewing of sorts to see if y'all understand what I'm asking the same way I think I'm asking it. So, I am going to do this a flip then. Rebecca, can you ask the question that I think I'm trying to ask so we can see where I am, how far off the road I may be? What am I trying to find out?
Um, I think you're trying to ask what's the importance of qualitative analysis.
So
Mm.
opposite. So I'm asking right now, what are the benefits of the quantitative?
Over qualitative or
Yes.
just
Quantitative over qualitative. What are the benefits? Why would we do the quantitative?
Is it a larger sample size?
Yes, you can get a larger sample size. So when you
Okay.
put those two things together, right, it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to get a much larger sample size that then can be representative even, right, of a population. And in the
Yes.
reality, if you did qualitative work to find out what all of those people thought, then you had to graduate. How many years until you get to graduate? It's a long, long, long time, right? And the
mm,
cost and the time, there's just so many factors. Now, what you need to hear there, though, is actually an advocacy for qual. I'm not, I like them both. I truly love both. So I feel like it's okay for me to do this. There's some people who are just passionate about one over the other. But let's still look at that. That we understand, if we're trying to find out what people think, the reason why we're doing the quantitative work is because we can ask a really wide, large audience that's potentially representative. And so we really have a much better feel for what a very large audience feels. But we're acknowledging, if in reality, that the best way to find out what somebody thinks is to talk to them. And the only reason why we're not doing that, the reason why we're not doing qual is because of those barriers about time and so forth, right? And that's why I'm going to throw out this AI, where we are with AI and where it's going and where research may be going. In reality, if the best way is to talk to somebody, and now we have AI avatars that can be made to where it feels like you're talking to somebody. So you don't have to wait and do one by one by one by one. And if you're using if AI gets a little bit better and it actually can analyze these discussions the same way we would with a qualitative researcher. So that's why I'm trying to get us to think about future here. You theoretically, I know Sam Hayes says, because it's like you're taking out the whole point. But it's still the point is the gold standard could change, and that if the gold standard is what do people think, and we talk to them, we hear what they say, and we explore that, right? It gives you the chance, instead of doing surveys, to do really beautiful, large scale qualitative work. And that possibly be the next level, that you might see down the road. Okay, Sam hates it. But I'm just saying keep
I just have some interesting thoughts because I mean, first of all, I think depending on the topic area, like I think about like my stuff, like there's so much nuance. I love that word.
yes.
There's so much nuance, and I'm like, is AI gonna capture that? And then like I think about too, which I feel like could go both ways. I'm like interested in like your feedback on that, but I feel like I think about like that participant researcher relationship and how there's a lot of like trust that goes in that. And so on the one hand, I think some people will be more resistant to talking to maybe what they perceive as like a robot. But on the other hand, we have definitely seen where people are using AI even as like their therapist or like a friend. So
Right.
maybe that would help to kind of navigate that challenge of getting your
Mhm.
participants to trust you.
Yep.
So
To actually feel
I
more
feel like,
comfortable. Yeah.
food for thought.
Sam, I think that's a great point and like exactly where my head is because like I know people on both ends of that spectrum who would absolutely not use something like this, but then some who maybe they've had adverse, issues with different doctors and things and would feel safer in
Right.
that respect. I
Mhm.
think it would provide maybe a door where there's not one currently.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other things it can open up is access. That we have so many people who we don't have access to and they don't have access to us. And you've got issues of barriers of transportation and time and, scheduling. And then you've got the potential to be reaching participants who feel safe because a lot of participants don't feel safe necessarily, traveling someplace to go do research on a college campus or an environment that's new and unfamiliar. So, I mean, there are a lot of potential barriers it could be addressing. And as you said, there are some people who already are starting to feel more comfortable, which has its own all sorts of other, um, psychology conversations we can have about where people are using AI and personalizing and developing relationships with, there are tons of movies made down this aspect, right? So I think these are all things that we need to be aware of as we move into the future. Um, but I definitely see it there are a lot of advantages that could be there as well. So I don't know. Let's stay tuned, okay? All right. That was there anything else, Meg, for you? Sorry, I went on.
Um, I think that was it. I think I took out the dietary recall assessment because I wanted to be more just based on their like because initially I was like maybe I give the like researchers context into the athletes. Oh, and I had my focus group split into different ages. So I had 14 to 25 and then 26 up to get
Woo,
like a different perspective on
14 to
um
25 is a
I know it's still quite a big. I was wondering if I should do still smaller.
oh, I
Like
would
I wasn't sure how many
definitely. I would
focus groups.
definitely. Can you imagine being a 14-year-old in a focus group with 25-year-olds? How's that going to
Mm,
adjust their response?
yeah,
You got
that's true.
yeah, you want to keep
Cause okay, yeah,
yeah, you would
that's
want to
true. I wasn't sure how many like focus groups you were supposed to really do, and so I had
good
just
question. Yeah, we'll get
the
into
two
that as well.
split.
Yeah.
But initially, for my after the 12-week lived experience of using the app, I had some like my idea would be to ask slightly different questions for the younger group who may still be living because I wanted to capture like people who may still be living at home and
Mhm.
may have less control over the food they can buy or have access to, like what that is like being aware of your diet, like just something I was thinking about, especially for those younger kids. But also, I was like, well, to be fair, like there are like 20 people my age, like 22, 23, living back at home, and so I was like, I wonder if there's it'd be interesting to ask about like the experience of wanting to change your diet but not having complete control over that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, definitely would split after that, maybe split 14 to 18. 18, you've got your high school, college, and then
Yeah.
older athletes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
And
sort of another change.
realize that whenever we're doing focus groups, the more heterogeneous your population is going to be, the more potential bias it can bring.
Hmm.
Especially because you're going to have some personalities that talk a lot and, we tend to dominate, and we'll drag other people along and then they'll agree just to agree, because it's more
Hmm.
comfortable. Um, and then there may be some topics that just won't come up because people are not comfortable talking about in that group setting. It's that decision. I think that decision between doing individual interviews versus doing focus groups should not just be based on the researcher's convenience, of trying to get done.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing, saturation is such a hard concept to come up with in focus groups. Um, but the more you can pay attention to, be purposeful in your recruitment, and keep those, think about all the factors that might be influencing in a negative way, right?
Hmm.
And try to control for those by where you set your parameters. Um, yeah, so that's good. All right, Bryce, how about you?
So I guess the main thing that I focused on, especially with the research design, was kind of switching sampling techniques.
Mhm,
So what I was originally going to use and was modeled after my article was the
mhm,
purposeful
mhm,
sampling. I think I butchered that term. But I can't remember who it was. It was either Nikki or Sam that had mentioned snowball sampling. I
mhm,
remember you had mentioned it
mhm,
either 1 or 2 weeks ago, and figured that actually might help with my like mock research presentation
mhm,
as well. So I really liked that sampling technique, but that was kind of the only change. The article I had was pretty weak. There's not a whole lot of qualitative research regarding both the combination of bone density outlook and GLP-1 receptor use. It's kind of a one or the other right now. So the article I used was just
mhm.
um, qualitative on the GLP-1 side. So there's nothing about bone density. So I guess for my research presentation, I guess for this week, I actually would have liked to combine the two,
Yeah, that'd be
and then also
very cutting
use
edge. Yeah.
the snowball sampling as well,
Mhm.
because I feel like that would be more beneficial form of sampling. But also it was kind of new, and I like to
Yeah.
try new
You,
things.
well, the only thing is with medical phenomenon, I don't think I would actually encourage snowball sampling.
Okay,
Because unless it's something that just everybody is, I mean, I guess we live in a world where people are more likely to be in online groups and get to know people, but yeah, finding people who are sharing their medical situation or medicines they're taking and da 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 with other people, if it's a, like I said, if it's a social media group, that's easier to kind of recruit from. Um, Otherwise, really, especially if you were looking at bone density specifically, I think working with doctors, even though it's a harder, it's much harder to get approval and get all the ducks in a row to do that, it's still going to be a stronger approach, to have the doctors be the ones that actually identify and potentially have to reach out to the patient to see if they're willing to participate. Which that there are a lot of barriers there, but that still would be a better way to find people who, are taking GLP-1s and especially have, if they have any issues with bone density. Um, so that
so
would
do
be
you think it would
one
make
way.
more sense to just stick with the purpose of
Yeah.
sampling?
Yeah, I think I would actually. And the thing is, I would also, because did you say you were doing interviews or focus group
So the model one I have was the semi-structured interviews.
interviews? Okay, great. Perfect. I just, because this is another place where, this, and yes, you get to dream big and just have fun and come up with these great research plans, but you still want to have it based in, some, practice and what you could actually do. And the thing is that you would probably want to have a rolling recruitment, and for something that's emerging like this and that's very specific. And so if you were working with doctors' offices as somebody gets identified to have, if you're looking for people who have issues with bone, density in one area, you might even be, yeah, it would be hard to find those people. But Yeah. So I would have a rolling recruitment and then I would be doing the interviews, not focus group. Very definitely. But yeah, those are my thoughts. There's not a right or wrong here. That's the fun part here, guys. Um, but oh, one thing I wanted to say from earlier, actually, was Sam, when you talked about nuanced, um, is something else that I haven't seen because this is not my research area, but there are so many very small body language and facial and vocal uh traits and practices and behaviors that are actually indicative of how somebody's feeling or thinking. That we, unless you have an amazing trained researcher, and I guess there've been a couple TV shows and movies where there's some, brilliant person who can like tell if you're lying, right, or something. Um, I think we're probably better off having AI trained to look for those changes, and you might actually, again, from combination is probably what I would do right now. So if I actually had a human doing the interviews, you could still have that AI looking for some really interesting things in terms of reaction to. There is, oh gosh, let me see if I can remember how it goes. This was years ago too, probably 10, not even kidding, where there was some assessment, and I want to say it was with dietary, and it was they would track your eye movement on a screen when you were exposed to certain things, and it could estimate your diet intake. Your yeah, it could
Oh,
estimate.
AI is there. Like
Yeah,
you can play
yeah,
chess games and things with eyes, which is great for accessibility purposes.
true, 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 true.
So
But
are we saying that like because AI is better at pattern, like are we saying AI is better at pattern recognition and everything all we do is basically a pattern? It's a
yes,
like that's how I'm kind of getting this like because
hmm,
yes, like obviously it's good to have a conversation, but if all movements and behavior things are just pattern,
hmm.
like that humans could miss, like I feel like it does
Yeah, and
sound
that's why
easy to
I'm saying
train
I
an
would use,
AI, but
and that's why I'm saying if possible, I would use both. And in the future, I
yeah,
definitely, as we move forward, I would use both.
I don't
Um,
see, but like I have watched so many YouTube videos of like oh, I'm analyzing this YouTuber's apology, and it's like them saying, oh, they look to the left, and like that's usually indicative of this, or like,
no,
oh, they rub their hands together, that's indicative of that. I bite the sides of
no,
my mouth for no reason.
yeah.
And I'm like, you could definitely interpret that as like, oh, she's lying. And I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like it's a good idea, but I feel like in practice, like I feel like I would be really careful with that. I don't
I
know.
no, I totally agree. And I definitely think that what you're, at least what you're talking about there from that we hear people saying is not, it's pseudoscience or just
Yeah.
not science based. But the type of eye pattern recognition
Yeah.
is totally different. It's at a different level. So like what I was saying is that you would be looking at a video or like images of a car or something. I don't know what they use. I can't remember. And it can tell by the way your eyes move. It could estimate your actual like diet quality. Like it could,
Yeah, and I think they use that a lot in
more than
psych too about like prejudice. Like I know they were like they'll give like participants certain photos and it's like however long they look at something or like moving like one way to another, like they can draw inferences about like racial prejudice and stuff like
Mhm.
that, which I think is
Yeah,
really interesting.
it
So
is.
I completely agree.
Um, the two things. One, first of all, when I was thinking about your work, I wasn't thinking so much about analyzing videos that are posted as opposed to having a camera on somebody's face while they're watching, social media influencers. And so instead of asking them, tell me about how you feel about what you just saw, I mean, I probably would still do that, but it'd be interesting to know what additional information you could get from um, an analysis, AI analyzing the face for those micro expressions and
it'd be really
Sam,
interesting to
I
see
feel
if
like with
someone argued
go
it.
ahead.
Sorry, I was just thinking that
No,
I was like,
I was gonna say
imagine
it's interesting
disagreeing
as
with the
well.
AI or the AI seeing, and then do you go with the human perspective because it's like, well, at the end of the day,
I think your neurodivergent
yeah, that was the next thing I was going to
community
say.
would definitely be because, well, like Sam, you said I bite the edge of my lip. I'm like la 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 all the time. I do crazy stuff, but it's because like I can't sit still, and so that I would be an outlier, right? I would throw off the system.
And I don't even think whether there are more neurodivergent people in the population today, or if we are more open to and self not self-diagnosing in a negative way, but and medical diagnosis and so forth. I don't know which one is which, but I feel like
Preach.
there's a lot of the population that is neurodivergent, and definitely being aware, even just we know from writing, that you're somebody who's neurodivergent, their writing is much more likely to be flagged as AI than somebody who's not neurodivergent. So anyway, um, okay, Rebecca, how about yours?
Yeah, so I think what stood out for me was from the article I read that I summarized. So this article is about um, exploring young people's perspective about food hygiene in order to create future development of effective education resources. So one thing that stood out for me was the study was kind of multi-centered qualitative study. It involves like schools from different region. I think in order to have like a balanced perspective, in order to be able to generalize. And I also like the fact that the schools work alongside with the researcher in order to pick students from some a particular, because I think I read that it was a purposive research, and I remember we talked about it last week about picking like doing a purposive study, something like that. So yeah, so that was what stood out for me. I'm missing my line of thought now. There's one other thing I wanted to say about that. Okay, there are some students, some schools opted out from that research. Some schools didn't allow that research. And in my mind, like Ricky also said during our um chat room, that why will some schools opt out of that research, knowing that this research can improve or like make them better or something like that. So yeah, that's that's like a question that I'm also ruminating on. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting. That's an interesting question. Um, I yeah, sorry. There are a lot of reasons why people and schools and organizations may opt out of research. That's there are yeah. Um, there are fewer reasons why people opt in.
yeah.
It's probably
Mhm.
and sorry for time. Sam, tell me about yours. I know.
Yeah, I did. My article was just a general qual study. And then I proposed netnography. That was fun. I almost did that for comps, but it wasn't quite fitting. So I had a little bit of research about that.
Mhm.
But I guess what I learned or what I refreshed on, Ricky asked a wonderful question, which was orient us to qual. Like, what is this? I was like, oh my God. So I think just going back to remembering, like I feel like once you get to this point, obviously it's like easy to like be in the weeds and you're like, what even is this methodology? How did I get here? So I think it was nice to like go back and think about like the basic pillars of qual and what
Mhm.
makes it different. I talked a little bit about paradigm and
Oh,
epistemology, ontology, what's the point?
I love it.
So it was fun.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so because I'm not gonna have enough time to do all this, my plan at this point is that I'm gonna just talk and get through the concepts to where you'd be able to fill in and or check to see your answers in your pre-survey versus pre-exam versus post-exam. Um, and it's recorded. And so if you need to drop off, as at the class is over at 3:30 or whatever, so or anytime you need to drop off, you can drop off and watch the recording later. If you want to stay on, then stay on and you'll have a discussion live. But I think that would be the best way to make sure you have access to the information because I keep running out of time. It's just fun. It's too much fun for me, at least. Sorry. Some of you are like, yes. Some of you are like, okay. All right. Well, I'm going to keep going then. Yes. Cool. So let's talk about, you were talking about different types of qualitative research, getting down to that basic and the general types that we think about in research. With the first being phenomenology, and that's really where we're trying to find out, we're trying to be able to describe an experience, right? So it's when we're trying to understand somebody's lived experiences, and it's when we're trying to find out for per participant or person their lived experiences around a specific phenomenon. I know I'm using the I'm using the sorry, is somebody needs to be muted. Where was that noise from? That
think
was,
we fixed it.
is it
It
you?
was from me. I
Oh,
think,
okay. Sorry,
yeah.
I couldn't see anybody green, so I was like, I don't think anybody's. Anyway, okay, sorry. So, I know that when using the word itself to define itself is not a strength, but I can't think of, because I said it's, when we're trying to understand a particular phenomenon of that person's lived experiences. So it's also about the meaning, um, of what they're experiencing and living through, that from their perspective, it's, and so it's not, we're not trying to test anything, like it's not a cause and effect relationship that we're trying to establish and test. It's really about the exploring to understand. This is usually done with in-depth interviews. It could be semi-structured or in-depth. I should have said interviews in general are what we use often for this. Um, and we tend to look for themes that really kind of capture, that experience. And so I'll talk about bracketing in a minute, but I want to introduce bracketing here first as we get into qualitative research, that you always want to start with bracketing, which is basically where you're trying to understand your own thoughts, feelings, experiences, biases before you go in to qualitative research. Because you, even with the best of intentions and the best researcher, because we are human, we are going to have our own lived experiences are going to impact how we are as researchers. So if you bracket at the beginning to understand where that's coming from, that's a strength. And that way you can always kind of notice when you're no longer keeping that participant's voice as the central thing that you're really exploring there. Um, so the next one, ethnography, as Sam mentioned, right? So that's and a lot of this is a nuanced, I'm gonna use that word too, difference between, and so you have to really understand what is the difference here? Because this is where we're trying to find out about a culture, like how does a culture or like a group function? So you're really trying to describe that cultural, that beliefs, the behaviors, the social interactions, all of those things. And when researchers usually, this is probably the biggest difference to me, at least, as I guess almost an outsider here, is that when researchers tend to do this type of research, they immerse themselves in that group's environment. And you may be doing observations, you may be participating in the daily activities, but we want to understand the behavior within the context of that group's culture overall, as opposed to understanding it from kind of an outside perspective. So you're going to see a lot of participant observations that are often combined with interviews, either semi-structured or in-depth, whatever. And you're usually going to keep field notes, which is kind of a systematic diary, is a way to think of that. It's it's gonna have a structure, that a priori, you're going to know what your structure is going to be. You can have different ways of keeping field notes. Some can be more free form and some can be really structured. And you can have a pretty wide, I think they've written books on field notes, which is ironic there. Anyway, and sometimes you also do document analysis for this to understand a group. All of those can go together. Historical research can kind of ask yourself, how did we get here? If you're asking yourself, how did we get here? And you want to be able to explain the past, then maybe historical research is what you want to be doing. So you want to look at past events. You're going to use documents and you're going to use records, are often, things that we'll look at to understand how different historical factors influenced present day knowledge or policies or practices. And so you're usually collecting data from historical sources. So I say that, but I want to recognize that all of this can be, there will be new types of qualitative work that emerges, just like we are talking about with AI, right? And a lot of that, for instance, AI with historical research, timeline for that has changed dramatically with the introduction of AI, for instance, right? It's pretty amazing the difference there. And so there may be growth, and we may combine some of this with other approaches, and we may have interviews as well. Um, but in general, it usually is archives of like, of course, government reports, newspapers, letters, photography, um, just anything previously published or recorded is what we can use there. Okay, case studies. Plenty of books written about case studies. Case studies is a cool approach to use. In a case study, in general, you're trying to understand one case really, 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 really deeply. You want to figure out what can you learn from that case. It's like it's an in-depth investigation, usually of it could be a single group, it could be a single person, or it could be a group, and that group is considered the case. It could be a program. It could be what else? Let's see. Community can be the group, right? That you're going to look at in your case study. Um, and there, it's more appropriate to use the case studies when you're looking at something that's really complex. Um, so you want to be able to have something of that complexity that needs you to take this amount of time to go really in depth, to examine all the different factors that are interacting and influencing the outcomes. So case study can be a great, really interesting, um, sometimes it's a part of research, it's a piece that you do as you do, you know, talk about mixed or multiple methods here, right? Because maybe before you do your intervention, right? You want to understand more about this phenomenon, that you could start there. You could then decide, I need to do a case study with the family that's experiencing this food insecurity. I really need to understand all the factors going on here. And then you could also move on to, maybe you did surveys before or after about to look at, what's going on with the food insecurity. So don't think that there's one thing that you would do and that's it. You can do multiple, or mixed. Grounded theory, however, takes longer if you're doing grounded theory, especially if you're doing it with Dr. Spence. That is all you're doing. And you're probably not going to pitch it to Dr. Spence because she's going to be like, you're not going to graduate and ever. You're not doing that. So grounded theory, people throw it around pretty casually, but it really is supposed to be a big deal because it's where you're actually building a theory. You're building a theory about why, something exists and how it exists. That's a big deal. So you're going to be looking at data and figuring out what theory emerges from that data. And so you're actually developing that theory based directly from that data. So you're not actually coming in with your own theory and then trying to, prove that this is the theory of how it works. It's that you're looking at what's going on, and it's an iterative process so where you're collecting data, you're analyzing data, you're going back and collecting more, you're looking at it more. Is it in a process of like the constant comparative method? I'm sure Sam has heard of that term. I'm not sure if anybody else, but it's where you are constantly, as you go, checking back and seeing what you got, that then tells you where you need to be going. So instead of having a research study that's like, boom, 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 we know where we're going for the whole thing. We're writing out a manual and everybody can follow it and we can pass it off, somebody else can do it. And in grounded theory work, you don't know. You don't know what you're going to have. You haven't done it yet. But as that data comes in, you're going to be analyzing it as you go. So you'll be using lots of different types of coding methods. You'll be memoing. Yeah, it's a lot of work. Okay. I mentioned bracketing here. I think that's what's next in your but I should have put it in a different place, so it made more sense. But as I said a minute ago, but I'm going to come back again because this is where it is in your document. This is something we do to reduce researcher bias, and it reminds us to be aware of and recognize so we can minimize the influence of our own perspectives because our research shouldn't be about our own perspectives. So it's where we're going to take time. You have to have somebody else who's working with you to help you because you can't really do it all yourself. You need somebody else. You can do a variety of things as part of the bracketing experience. But it's where you're going to intentionally not only recognize but reflect on, and then you have to intentionally set aside your own personal beliefs or your assumptions or your own experiences and biases. And that way you're not influencing what data is being collected and you're not influencing how you're interpreting that data. So you could be maintaining like a journal of reflexive journal that and then you can talk about those assumptions that you document with your research team. And then usually that's an ongoing basis and you're constantly reflecting on how your own perspectives might be influencing the research process as you go. So you're always thinking about it and not letting it just fall to the back, something you checked it at the beginning. So it's really important when you're looking at phenomenological research where you're trying to understand a participant's experience because you want to make sure that it's their experience, their perspectives, not yours putting it on top of it. So let's see. I think I've got participant observation next. Is that right? I think. This is a really weird how okay, good. So I mentioned participant observation earlier. It's an approach that people can do where the researcher is actually going to participate. Well, there are different levels, you'll see. But in general, a researcher observes the participant in their natural environment is across the board. So it can also be while that researcher is actually participating as well. And that can be, you can have different degrees. You can have something where the participant is very, I'm sorry, the researcher is very removed and does not do very much with the participant. And that's more likely to change the participant's experiences and how they behave because somebody's watching them, right? Whereas if somebody's working with you and doing things with you and doing an experience with you, then they're less likely to necessarily have changed their behaviors. So it also lets the research, there's something you learn by doing, you know? I'm gonna guess that if you watch the running of the bulls, to use a strange, that's going to be a different participant observation experience for the researcher than if you actually run with the bulls. Uh, just my guess there. Yeah. So you can decide beforehand if you want minimal interaction or if you're going to have complete participation, where you actually, if with complete participation, the researcher is an active member of the group. So right, if you're running with the bulls, you're probably, completely there. Um, so it's important for this approach is really helpful when our other tools aren't going to be as good. That we're going to be able to understand more about behaviors, social interactions, maybe cultural practices that we're not going to get through, say, an interview alone. You're just not going to get the same. So usually have detailed field notes that you're going to be keeping throughout the study. Often sometimes that you can take those field notes as the participant observation is happening. Sometimes you're more immersed and you have to remember and write it down afterwards. Those are different options there. There is a very funny movie that we may have to have a follow-up movie night in August for you guys if you want to come, and I won't make anybody come, obviously, but it's a movie that my father-in-law bought for me if I can find. If not, I should just buy it again because it was adorable that he bought it for me. And it was called Kitchen Stories is what it's called. And it's the funniest, it's an international Anyway, it's just funny. Olds or not that old, but we might have to do it. And you'll see the research side of it as not seriously you're going to learn from it, but we'll just have a popcorn, dinner night. The Yeah, maybe we'll do it outside. I just got a new screen.
I love that. That sounds so
It,
fun.
it, it really would. And then all of this, yeah, because you've taken in research classes, it'll make you enjoy the movie in a whole new way. Okay, focus group. So this one is besides interviews, the most common that when we think about qual, we think about, doing focus groups. There is such an art to this, guys. There is such an art. So if you're going to do focus groups, there are books to read. You want to practice. Some people are naturally really good at focus groups, and some people are not as naturally good for reasons you wouldn't necessarily expect. For instance, what I have to fight, don't be shocked, but I have to keep myself from participating in the dialogue. I can't talk about what I think in my experiences during the focus group, right? I know it's so bad.
I
But
have one focus group, and that is I had to be reminded.
yes, it's
Meg
so
was
hard.
there. Meg
Yeah,
was part of it.
it's so hard. Some of the things that are true for both focus groups and interviews, are that we use, this is a counselor face is what I call it, but whatever your habits are, of when people talk, I tend to smile, I tend to say yes, with my head, I tend to, in my body language. If that's your go-to, you have to make sure you have it all the way through. Because if you use that with when they're talking about one thing, and then you get solemn when they're talking about something else, you're going to guide that conversation from those nuances that people aren't aware of. So there are also lots of like little tips that you can learn, and maybe you've already found that if you have somebody who's dominated the conversation, there's that we have like specific things we can do to help that stop. But the more practice you have, the better you are. First is you can stop looking at the person who's talking. Then you start looking down while they're talking. For a lot of people, that's enough to get them to realize. Eventually, just to jump ahead, eventually you actually look at somebody else and say, "So tell me what do you think about da da da?" So that's the, not yeah, that's the last thing you want to do. Because if you cut somebody off, that can affect the whole conversation too, because it also affects how safe other people feel sharing. Not, even though they're not the one that was dominating, but it still affects how safe they feel. Anyway, there are all sorts of things that we could learn there. So we could have an entire semester long on just doing focus groups and doing them well. I will share briefly a is it pat on the back? I don't know, whatever. But it's my example of how I put my quant onto qual. When I was with the USDA and I was doing some focus groups, there's something called a nominal group technique that I had read about and I really liked, but I wanted to modify it slightly. So I modified, and we finally ended up publishing one article years later using it. I think it was with Sanildra, and maybe it was McKinsey. Anyway, I called an MNGT, so it was a modified nominal group technique. And in this technique, what you do is you ask a question. Oh, okay, Bryce. I'll see you. I'm sorry, but it's recorded. So if you want, you can come back. You ask a question of the group, and then you ask them to write down their answers on their paper. And then you go around round robin and you have them share one of their answers as you go around. And you keep doing that until people have shared all of their answers. And then you ask them to write down. So you write them on the, board or white or the paper as you go. And then you ask them to rank the top five. So on their paper, they're going to actually put the top five from like one being the most impactful to five the least, right? And so then as a group, you share what you have as your number one, and you kind of come to group consensus of what one's going to be, what two, three, four, five, right? But since not everybody agrees, and a lot of people kind of go with it just because, you don't want to fight the group, if that's the next step is where you write down a number on the paper alone. You don't share it. So you write down like say number one, we said, what's the hard thing about getting food on campus? And we decided the number one thing was going to be traffic, whatever, so although that's what the group had decided was number one, you might not think that's actually really a big deal. So you might actually give it 0 points. But if you think it's a huge deal, you're going to write 10. So it's between 0 and 10. And what it does in this method, and then of course you take up the papers at the end, so you let people know that at the beginning. And you have a different one for each of the questions. Usually about 3 to 5 questions is all you can do in a good hour dialogue. Is that you come away with your work is already analyzed. It's already done. The analysis is done, and you had member checking throughout. That's amazing. So, it's got some benefits there. If anybody ever wants to know more about MNGT, just let me know, and I will cover it with you. Oh, where did my thing go? I can't remember what's next. Okay, I think I'm there. Okay, interviews. Again, one-on-one conversations. This is going to be semi-structured, where you have the questions, but there's flexibility. You could have a structured where it's predetermined questions, you're going to stick with it. And then you can have unstructured where it's just an open conversation. Most people usually use a semi-structured because it gives them, because you don't want to change your research decisions design after you get started. And so often there's something you discover during the interviews that's really important that you had not thought to ask. And so once that's been identified, it gives you the ability to have some probes, with other people as you go from there to find out their thoughts. Now, do you go back to the first couple before they was included? It's a little bit of a stretch, but it still gives you more flexibility to explore those issues with all your participants. So it gives you can ask follow-up questions. It's just semi-structured has some real benefits there. So coding, we're going to talk about coding, and I think I've got some PowerPoints I'm going to show real quick, if I can do that. I don't have to. The only other thing that I don't know if I have under my code document that I'm going to open is, so you'll have to remind me if I don't, triangulations and saturation. I kind of feel like I need to pick up. No, I think it's fine. I mean, I guess flip
You
ahead.
have them. Yeah, I was going to say they're on the other qualitative terms.
Yes. Now, and are there what else is there besides? So, triangulation, just understand that's where we have multiple sources of data that we use to all look at the same question or concept, right? And that is a real benefit, because if you see it happen in multiple different types of data and they're all telling you the same thing, it really helps to strengthen that the conclusions that you might be drawing.
Mhm.
And so the more you have more confidence in your findings. So triangulation is a great thing to include in your research, qualitative. Saturation, that occurs when you are no longer getting new information. You're not getting new themes or categories or insights. Now you see, it depends on when you're doing your research, because I mean your analysis, because if we're talking about new themes or categories, we'll get into coding in a minute. But if you do all of your interviews, at what point did you know you reached saturation? It could have been earlier on. So that's something you want to plan ahead, where there may be certain points of stop that you're going to be doing analysis and then deciding whether to move on. So you might do, because you don't want to do lesson 5 for like interviews. You can get away with one focus group, depends on what you're looking at, but often you'll have 5 focus groups. It just depends. It depends on lots of things. So uh, the other thing is, the more heterogeneous your population is in your sampling and recruitment approaches, you're going to reach saturation earlier or later. The more you can, depending on what your question and purpose of what you're doing is, but the more you can keep it to where the homogeneity is really high, and you've got some similar characteristics, you're much more likely to actually reach saturation. Otherwise, it can be a question mark. So let's see. Inquiry audit, that's where you have an external person come in and their experience. They know what they're doing with qual, and they're going to look at your documentation. They're going to look at how you decided to code, all the procedures you adopted, and they'll actually look at your conclusions too to make sure that the findings that you're coming away from are really well supported by the data, and whether the research process was, transparent, trustworthy, all those good things. Peer debriefing. That's where you're going to talk about the data. You're going to talk about the coding decisions and how you're interpreting things and emerging findings. And you'll be talking with, it could be a knowledgeable colleague that they were not directly involved in the study, but you're still able to discuss it in kind of a informal, formal way, that's planned ahead. And so that can really help you. It can challenge your assumptions. It can help you maybe see some alternative explanations for what was found. It's really going to also help strengthen your credibility if that's part of your process. Um, Negative cases. Also, they can be called deviant cases or disconfirming evidence. So those are things that contradict the emergent things or theories. Now, instead of just ignoring the contradictory, evidence, then qualitative researchers intentionally examine those negative cases, and it can help to refine or expand or modify their interpretations that they're making. So they can really strengthen the credibility if they're, if they're not just ignored and thrown out. That's something that's actually, we lean into it instead. I think that's all of the extra.
Mhm.
Okay, so what I'm going to pull up real quick, if I can make it behave, is a coding document. And Sam, I think this is a coding document I've used. You've seen this before, so again, it's always fun to hear again. You can always step off, don't worry. And I'm not positive if it's going to have a voice with it. Let's find out. Oh, I gotta find you guys again. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are. All right. So sharing screen. And I start with this talking about inductive and deductive, just because I've seen people get caught up during comps and or later, just even presenting findings. And somebody says when they did qualitative research, and they're like, "Did you use an inductive or deductive coding method?" And the person is like, I don't know." So
Mm.
ever since then, I try to make sure this is something that I cover so everybody sees it. Um, and to avoid it making, maybe we can try, but I think there may be voice with this. Um, I don't see. Oh, there it is. Play name. Take that off. Take off the timings. All right. I don't know. I don't know what keep slides updated mean, but we'll find out. Okay. So, dun, dun, dun. Okay, cool. So, there are a lot of different types of coding, and you can actually use multiple methods of coding, which really is crazy and really but you have to decide beforehand what you're doing and understand what you're doing, right? Anyway, and I feel like these are mushed up in terms of how I'm presenting them. Um, but that's okay. I can't change it right now because it's already on my screen. So, because like I want to do descriptive first. Anyway, so
Mhm.
a pattern coding for some reason I've got here first. But it's a more it's something you actually do later. It's a second cycle coding method, and you're gonna have things already coded, and you're gonna be putting them into groups. You're gonna be looking for those patterns that you saw earlier, and so it's actually what's gonna be. You're gonna be in the process of going toward your categories and toward the explanations. So that's why I'm like, why did I have this first? It shouldn't be first. Oh well. Structural coding, this is where it's going to be, you're going to decide a priori by the interview questions, how you're going to code based on different every time I want to use words, it's like, well, that means this and that, because I'm also say different themes or categories.
Hmm.
Um, so, and you'll see how so much of that is overlapping. But it's good when you're looking for systematic comparisons, is when you're most often going to use structural coding. Values coding is when you're specifically looking for beliefs and attitudes, and that's what you're going to focus on. And it's when you're trying to look for, like I've got here, norms and priorities. And it's really about perception. When you're, I don't think I've actually ever seen, I need to read an article where they use values coding, because I've never actually read an article where they use it. So open coding. Now there's the opposite. You're going to see that
Hmm.
all the time when you read articles. And that's because there's no rigid structure. It's what you very often will see in that early stage, just like pattern was second cycle. This is exploratory. It's when it's very, very early. It's, you're going to start potentially, identifying those relevant ideas, right? Emotion coding is another one that I have not seen used. Sam, have you read any articles that use values or emotion coding? I'm just curious.
I don't think so.
Yeah, or at least the authors haven't said that, that's what they're doing. But in emotion coding, you just decide beforehand, you're focused specifically on the feelings, and it's their emotional experience. They say it's common in health research, and maybe it is. I just haven't seen it. Process coding is another one you're going to see a lot of. And that is it's going to capture the actions. You're going to be using a lot of ing terms, so it's actually something happening is what you're going to be describing happening there. And so behavioral researchers might use this more. Okay, descriptive coding is another one you're going to hear a lot of. And that's where you've got, gosh, I'm getting so many calls. They need to just calm down. So they, in descriptive coding, it's going to be where it's capturing which topics have been talked about. Again, this is very often early analysis. We'll use some descriptive coding. And then in vivo is where we're focused on using the participants' own words, is really trying to get their meaning, their voice, having as little research or interpretation as possible.
This is a great slide.
Yeah, it was just smushing it all together. I just need to rearrange it and make it actually flow. And so, yeah, any of these can be inductive or deductive. So, what's the difference? And is it not going on? It does not want to go on. Well done. Hello. It says no. It says I will not go forward. You cannot make me. Haha, I did. Um, okay. Understand, just like I started saying, where you saw all those codes, those are just types of codes. You can do more than one. You can have multiple strategies. And most often that's actually what happens is people use multiple of those in the previous slide. Depends on what your research goals are. So, but the best thing to do would be to decide a priority, which ones you're going to use. I think that to me, there's a difference when you're learning and you're still figuring things out and you get in there and you're like, oh, if I could look at it this way. So adding on a different approach because you're learning is to me different than adding on a different approach because you're trying to get something, kind of massaging the data, massaging. So any place along that line. But I think it's okay to add on as you see that there's, a different type of coding because I can
It
flip.
seems it
Yeah.
seems like it's okay to add on, but not to like limit it in a certain
Yeah,
way.
I don't know because I could go either way because like I was going to use emotion coding as an example that I have not seen people use. So they could be doing open coding, da da da, and they're then they're going to be using pattern coding, whatever. That's what they a priori decide, right? But
Hmm.
then they get in there and they're like, oh, there's a lot of emotion stuff going on. I think I should be looking, what if I look at this whole transcript looking to code those emotional,
Mm.
concepts, right?
So you
So I could
can't
see,
look at it as like changing as much as you really have to be just like deductive reasoning, like why did they change
yes,
it?
right,
Okay.
exactly. And they don't actually, when you're publishing, you don't say when you decide. And I mean, some people might put a
Yeah.
priori, but most people don't. They just say, this is what we
Yeah.
did. And so you don't know if they did it before or after. But I was just, you can see how, or vice versa, you could have been planning to capture all these emotions. And then there's just like nothing that came up with emotions. And you're like, well, I'm not going to be coding for that. So
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to adjust. Yeah. is really about the research goals, is where it should come from. Okay, so here's the difference between inductive and deductive. It's not rocket science at all. Inductive just means it's coming from the bottom up. So the themes and the codes are going to come from the data. So you're not going to have a predetermined framework of codes already created. So in other words, generally a code book is the way to think about this. So if you go in and you train and you know ahead of time what you're looking for, you've got a code book. So a code book can have, like, column where you've got code number 1 means bitter taste. I don't know. And for me, whenever you're going through and coding, then you can use, number 1, it means bitter taste all the way through. So there may be times that, based on previous research, what you expect and what you're interested from your research question, you expect to see. And so in that case, you could be doing deductive coding. So that's where you're going to have a predefined codes, and you've already developed a code book. And then you train people on how to do it, and they use your code book. I would say deductive is the most commonly used approach. Um, Sam could probably talk to us about some of the pain of doing inductive. Um,
I hate coding.
do you? I like
Terrible.
coding. I like coding. Oh,
And Dr. Colby uses numbers in her coding,
yes.
and it works for her brain. And then we tried to do it with my brain, and it didn't work for my brain.
I love my numbers. They're so easy because especially if you've got a lot that you're coding, and I always know that 23 means, the parents were overly controlling, And so as I see it happen again, because I'm old school, I didn't grow up on in vivo. And so I grew up on highlighters and writing, printing things off double spaced and then type and writing in my numbers, and I always use 99 as it does. There's not a code. It does not, we don't already have a code for it. So if you use inductive coding and you have, say, you have to have at least 2, but let's say we even had 3 people who were going to be coding, and you always have, in general, as you've read the articles and you see this, you have at least 2 people independently, will code, and then you have a third who will come in. And this is just what I think is most commonly done and what I do. And then you have a third that helps address any of the disagreements, right? Looks through both. Anything that's different, that third researcher gets to decide the deciding vote of which way it is. Was it 23 or was it 2? Whatever the discrepancy is. And so the thing about, if you're doing inductive, the difference there is that you don't have this, 21 through whatever numbered and already defined. Both people go through and code using whatever predetermined method they were going to do, right? So there's some help if it's like, oh, we're looking for emotions, or we're looking for this, but it's still they're just coding themselves, and then they come together and they talk about how they coded, and come to consensus and they agree. Oh, this part of this sentence means this. This part means this, and that can be. I mean, I can see strengths that you have less bias because one part, but it can be just, you know, it can be painful. I will say that in reality, I usually have a combination of this. I've never thought about this before. Isn't it cool? I've been doing this how long? And this is the first time I'm really thinking about it. And that I normally will take a couple, 1 or 2 or 3 of the interviews, for instance, transcripts, and I would do inductive coding and create a code book. And then I train the people who are coding, and they use the code book in deductive coding to do all the rest, right? And I check at the beginning, we do a certain number of sample ones. where they get trained, they get to see that they understand it the same way. We check for an 80% or more agreement
And that way
before.
it's like tailored to your research, right?
Right, to my research question, to what
Okay.
I'm actually finding, because usually I'm the one that's either done all the interviews or have listened to the interviews, before. And so it rolls it's much smoother that way. Anyway, um, so in reality, I do both. And I know I got permission for that from one of my gurus. So big picture, what you just need to remember, inductive codes come from the data. Deductive, you actually start with predefined codes. You can always add to in deductive and change. So don't think that you're stuck with them, but that's where you start. So that code book, you want it to have at least the code name. You want it to then define what you mean by that. So you may have hungry, and then you're going to need to write beside it, what do you mean by hungry? And then you want to have, the more you can have in your code book, the better it's going to be for the whole team if you're doing, deductive. So you're going to have not only definitions, but then you have the inclusion and exclusion criteria, as well as always save a couple of great quotes that really highlight whatever it is you mean by that code. You'll use that not only to help with training and make sure everybody's on the same page when they're coding, but also when you're working on your manuscript and your presentations, being able to go back and just grab some great quotes really easily is worth it. So yeah, so inductive, the researcher develops a code book as you go, and you do it together as a big team. I, for whatever reason, think it's pain, but maybe it's great. I am much more of a deductive kind of. I like to either have somebody else hand me a code book and train me on it, or I like to make a code book. Either way, but I like to go in with that personally. But one's not better than the other. They're just a little different. Okay, so in deductive coding, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to define that coding framework. So you're going to, based on previous literature, theories, research questions, you've got ideas of what you think you're going to find there. So then you make your code book. That's step two. Step three, then you train those coders using sample transcripts. They have to reach an 80% agreement to be able to move on. So sometimes you have to have more than a couple sample transcripts as you go through the training. And then you have your coders independently label, which is putting the codes on, all the different text segments that match those codes. And like here, I mentioned that anything that doesn't fit what's in the code book, they just write 99. And then you come together later as a group and decide what those 99 should be. And that's,
I've seen that. The 99 used or like a weird
yeah, yes,
XX or
yeah,
something. I realize what you mean by that now. I've
okay.
seen that in like when we were going through different stuff in Dr. French's class and
Uh-huh.
reading what people had found.
Yeah, I think this is really cool to be doing this right after you're kind of, you get exposed and then think about it again. You got to go, Sam. Bye. Okay, you're hanging in. I would talk to
Yeah,
myself. Don't worry, it'd be fun. If you need to go, Ricky, don't feel like the pressure.
I've got about 10 more minutes left
Okay,
before I got to
cool.
hop
I'm
off.
actually almost done. That's amazing.
Cool.
Okay, so deductive. So then the third researcher looks at any conflicting codes and resolves them, right? And then we figure out what the 99 should be. So inductive, read, think about the whole patterns, what you see, you go back through and you start writing, the codes as you go, you create the code book as you're going, you look over it, you think about what themes you start to see, and then you start to write down your themes and the codes that go under the theme, and then you write down some examples of those quotes that represent the theme. Um, so the first thing you want to do is it's funny how I sound less happy when I talk about this one. The first thing you want to do is you want to read over the data. You want to read the transcripts and just be thinking about it. Maybe, you can take notes as you go and reflections to get those sense of the patterns that you think are going to be there. And then each researcher is going to code the data and then they're going to talk about it together, focusing on what emerged from the data. So this is the comparison. So they come together and they look to see what kind of codes they came up with, and they come up with agreements. And they oftentimes they'll just come to consensus among themselves. You can have a third person as well. So, but together you have at least two people who are going to create that code book, and they come up with the names, the definitions, the example quotes. And it still allows for flexibility. As new things emerge, you come back and you just make changes to your code book. And so you're gonna, after you've developed your code book, after you did your first ones, come together, you come up with the agreement on the code book, you have to go back and code that first one based on the code book. So y'all agreed on. So you can use intercoder agreement to talk about that 80%. So that's the percentage agreement is 80%. The Cohen's kappa is something you calculate. It's not that much different. It's just a stats that go behind, but it's the same concept. Do they agree? So you have two basic differences in how you handle those discrepancies. You can either have your two researchers come together and come to consensus, or and only pull in a third researcher if they don't agree, or you just have a protocol where automatically that third researcher, which is what I like to do, the third researcher reviews it all and then decides on the discrepancies. But sometimes if there's not enough written down about it, that third coder will actually call the two coders, and actually the three of them will talk about it to try to figure out what's going on, what consensus should be made.
Yeah.
So then you go into analysis. So you'll
Mm-hmm.
see this. Usually, this is all of this that I'm talking about is in 2 sentences in an article most often. That's all you get on it. But so you've done this, whatever coding you did. So maybe open coding. I think the most common thing I ever see is open coding and narrative analysis is what I use. Boom, check, done. So narrative, content, or thematic are the three that we see the most often. Narrative just means that it's the meaning is captured. So and how the experiences are understood. So content is when you are going to just be looking at, and this is one I like a lot because counts and frequencies. So you can kind of compare categories of what you saw the most of. So what came up the most often. And so it's a little less interpretive, a little bit more descriptive, but I love the merge. So, and then thematic is looking for those patterns, those reoccurring patterns that you see. So
Would
that's,
we use two? So if like I use content analysis, could I then
yes,
take thematic analysis and reanalyze
you sure
what I
can.
found? Okay,
Yep.
that's what I would
Yeah, you
imagine.
definitely can. Yeah.
Which I guess
Again,
you could use narrative, but I see why you like content. I mean,
I
it's
do. I mean,
more.
yeah. And you don't, yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever done just straight content and that's it. It's just, I
Yeah.
like it a lot. But to understand what's going on, the thematic, or the narrative. But I don't know if thematic or narrative is more often used. That's an interesting question. Just same thing you saw here, as I said before, but it's how is a story constructed? And what does it reveal? So
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to understand things. And then we're trying to look at the overall story and not just tiny pieces of it. So that's why narrative,
Mm-hmm.
that overall picture, I like that. So if you want to understand about identity or something that's making sense of something, especially if you're looking at like life transitions or journeys,
Mm-hmm.
um, before after changes, some subjective meaning narrative might be the best way to go. So we often have,
I'm not hopping off. I just have to walk away for 1 minute,
you're
but I'm
good. I'm
still
going to keep
listening.
talking. So yeah. So in narrative, you usually have you've got types, structures, trajectories, because the thing about the storyline, you're going to be talking about identities that are seen. You might be documenting the plot or the storyline. And you're looking at the meaning is emerging looking at the patterns over time is how you're going to figure out what's going on there. What does it mean? So content is in some ways the most straightforward because it's what types of content are present, how are they distributed. So you can see how when I was doing nutrition marketing, we've talked about before, that the nutrition marketing counting how often I'm seeing them, and that would be pretty straightforward, right? So what ideas, topics, categories, and how is that information is being communicated? So you have to decide the units of the content and how you're going to classify those and categorize those. So you're often going to use this when you're describing something, categorizing, comparing. You're not trying to get a deeper meaning or to understand somebody's lived experiences with content analysis. So some of the things that can come out of it is you could have a very clearly defined category. You could have how a classification system, how things are grouped by similar something, similar material, similar and then you can actually count how often that category comes up. You can express that in percentages. You can look at how relative to the topics, the different topics that you're interested in and focused on. You can describe the characterization of certain groups or data set or source. You would want to be able to, you could not want to be able, but you could talk about the differences between different stakeholder groups and how they responded to things. What was their number one problem that they wanted to address versus another group? And so you can really see those differences across groups or platforms or periods of time. So I think there's interesting stuff. I know it's basic, but I like it. So when you're doing content, you first want to decide what area are you focused on, what are the topics that are present, what messages are occurring, and how often do those ideas occur. And then you want to decide your material. Do you have interviews? You can actually do this content analysis with survey responses. You can be looking at TV shows, and I did stuff looking to see how often different food messages were seen in different types of television. And so you can look that you're gonna it's this can be much cleaner. You can be more consistent outputs here. So often you're coding words, sentences, phrases, or meaning. So when I was doing the nutrition marketing, I'm looking for, well, I guess I was still meaning of unit type of marketing, but often it would be the words. We actually would count the number of times we see certain words, protein or high protein or whereas when we did the television work, we're definitely looking at those meanings. And we have examples in the code book, but we didn't have certain words that we were counting. But we could have, I guess. So you can have categories that you already know you're looking for. So that's deductive, predetermined. These are the categories you want. Or you could have inductive where you don't know yet which categories are going to be, but from looking at the data, you figure it out. Some examples of the type of categories that we're talking about are like cost, access, and barrier. So you could then look at interviews to see and put the information based on if they were talking about cost, if they're talking about access or barriers, just as an example, but it's not specific. So your coding rules should be really clearly defined. You need to be able to tell people what belongs in that code and what does not belong, and you want to give examples. So it's really easy for them to pick up the code book after some really nice clean training and run with it, and it'd be easy to do. So then they will apply their rules that they see in the code book and that they got from the training, and that they all agreed with a sample transcript at more than 80%. And sometimes you're going to need multiple categories to be allowed. So the same content can actually fit multiple things, be counted in different categories. So it's the same phrase that was highlighted in my mind in green, because we don't get a highlighter anymore, unfortunately, in hand. But it actually could count for both cost and access. I can't remember the three were before. So to improve reliability, you want to compare the coding decisions. Again, that third person is going to be checking for any disagreements and would resolve those. And sometimes that third person you want to decide beforehand when they're going to be looking at things, because if they can look as the first two get done, if they see problems, they can like clean up the code book and refine those definitions and send out an email and let people know, oh, check this. I fixed it to be a little bit more specific. And that's going to save you a lot of trouble if you catch it at the first two, instead of trying to find it all at the end when the patterns are problems we're seeing. So again, you can report in terms of category frequency. You could report based on what happens a lot of, dominant, or that you hardly ever see, rare content, and you can compare between groups, maybe of people who did interviews with different characteristics. How often do you count this occurring here versus with group people with this kind of background reported this often? So you're looking to see often what's the most common, what dominates the discussion. And you can be looking for practical implications from your findings. So there's a ton of stuff that was high in saturated fat and added sugar that was marketed as healthy for kids. I mean, it's yeah, what do you see? Okay, thematic analysis, the one that's the third that's very commonly used, and you're trying to find out what's being said across all your participants. So you're looking for those reoccurring patterns. You're looking to see similar ideas that are occurring with different interviews or focus groups. You're going to be producing themes that represent those shared experiences. So data is usually it's fragmented in little coding segments and thematic analysis. And this is good and useful when you're comparing across participants. You want to, again, here you can still be looking for a dominant pattern. So you can do kind of the same things in coding in the content as you do in thematic. And it can be really good when we're looking at applied concepts and policy questions. So you want to be able to analyze and report on the themes, which are the patterns. And it's the strong qualitative analysis is going to move it beyond just listing topics, but it's actually going to explain what was found and kind of provide a narrative. And so the themes, this throws off a lot of people, but themes are actually done after coding is completed. So the first is where you put all the codes in. And then you look to see those overarching themes when the codes are grouped. So all of these codes actually are about hunger, and then hunger can become my overarching theme, right? So themes are going to emerge from the data. They're not from pre-existing framework. And the researchers work together to both define it and name them and make sure that they're really explaining the essence of that data. So then the researchers will cross-check the themes against the data source to make sure they're representing everything they saw in the data. And then you can refine. That's the other thing, is after you've got your themes, it's not written in stone. You can sometimes split, or you can sometimes put two themes together because it really is all about access, or you could split that you have this all hunger, but this part is really about dieting for weight, and then this part is about not having enough finances to get it's both hunger, but it's a totally different situation there. So, and you can reorganize as you look at your themes. So it's flexible. You can make changes as you think
Would
about it.
that also be a way that you could kind of not weed out, but kind of weed out information that you wouldn't necessarily need to include? Like if, I guess in your final result, or maybe
Right.
things that like affected negatively, I guess that would be like picking and choosing.
Yeah, I think that to me, when I hear you read out, what is more removed are when people go off topic when we're having a conversation
Mhm,
in an
mhm.
interview, and you're like, what do I think? How do I code that? Well,
Yeah.
that's weeded. They need to weed that out. That's just conversation.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so that you could take out. Um, so basically you want to make sure at the end that your themes are distinct and easy to describe and easily to show in the data what fits under the themes to explain how you came up with the themes. And you want to make sure that they're aligned with whatever research question you're looking at. You can make some adjustments as you go based on what you find. But my biggest suggestion, I know you guys have better brain cells than I do. I totally love that. Um, for me, if I don't write it down, it's gone. I warn you, you don't know when your brain cells go bye-bye. You want to start writing down now as a habit because you will forget it later. Every time you make a decision about how you're going to group things or split things, or you always write it down because you will forget, even though you think you won't. So being cutesy here, I had categories, codes, and themes. Oh my. So the way you can think about this is it goes from raw data to codes, then to categories, and then to themes. Um, it might be easier to think about it as going from labels to grouping to think about what are the meaning. So your codes are how you label the data. You're just identifying. The categories are how you organize those codes. And then the theme explaining what that means. So that sums up a lot as a whole. Yeah, this is basically the same thing. You're just going from the raw data, codes, categories, themes. I just kind of want to reiterate that. It's also
That
worth saying,
breakdown is very helpful.
yeah, it really does help. Just it really brings it down to just the basics. And it's easy to see. You're going to have a ton of codes, you're going to have some categories, and you're only going to have a few themes, because the themes are what you're going to really report on in your presentations and in your articles. So wrapping up, whenever possible, your researchers should all look at the draft of the results section to make sure that, since they're the ones that were underwater and in the weeds with all of this, make sure that that you're kind of member checking, even though they're not members here. So that was not actually the best way to put it, but you want to check with all of your researchers and make sure everybody agrees that it fits what they saw and what they were thinking. And always make sure you have a few supporting quotes that illustrate each theme, handy and ready to go. So giving you some examples again, I know it's so simple, this codes, categories, themes, it will be confusing sometime later, but you can see how codes could be lack of time. So time, it could be fatigue, for work fatigue, it could be meal preparation difficulty, but time could actually go under practical constraints. Although work fatigue, I don't know. Anyway, this is not the best example now that I look at this. And
No,
you,
but I see the theme of these. It's kind of like
right.
I hate to say this, but in therapy, they're
Yeah,
always like, and then why though? It's finding that deeper meaning of something.
it is. And getting to all the pieces that come together to make that deeper meaning. So in some ways, it's easier to look from the theme here in this example and go backwards.
I
But
did that actually. When you
yeah,
pulled it up, I read it
it
and then I
made
read it
sense.
backwards, and it is helpful.
Yes, reading it backwards makes a lot more sense in this example. Not that we're going to go through these, but just so that you know, we've looked at narrative, content, and thematic in detail, whereas earlier we talked about the grounded theory, phenomenology. We didn't go into discourse analysis, so you might want to look that up later if you're interested, or framework analysis. We talked about ethnography, case studies, and then we did not talk about reflexive or interpretive. So again, either we can talk later or you can look it up. But those are all there. I'm going to flip through these only so that you can see you could always pause if you're watching this later if you wanted to see, but we just talked about these, but without visuals, and we all learn in different ways. So some people would probably like the slides, and now they can pause it and look at the slides as you go. But we just talked about all this today.
We actually talked about a lot of these in our breakout rooms, especially.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Cool. Okay. So
Sam
that,
introduced us to that last one, the ethno.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I said it correctly, but that was a new term for me today.
Cool. All right. Well, you survived a very long class. Last class went way long. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But thank
I
you.
find it, I know I actually really do find it interesting.
So
So,
fun, isn't it? It's like, I don't know.
I mean, obviously, I can't bring myself to step away.
Yeah.
I clearly I really do just find it. I mean, I can't do clinical work and help in that side without this. So, I just
Well,
don't think they're separate.
and I have a feeling you will be doing research in your life.
Oh yeah, I actually just
Oh,
today I sent Kristen Rigsby an email because she tried to connect us a year